Hey everybody, welcome back. This week we're talking about drugs, how they're useful in therapy, and more importantly, what their usefulness in therapy indicates about the nature of our psychology. Drugs, and more generally, altered states of consciousness are becoming more popular and more talked about as being possibly useful in therapy, which I think is true. I think there is a useful place for them. But I think what's more important is the context in which we use drugs or altered states of consciousness. I wrote an article about this, I think last year. I'll post it in the description called Psychedelic Objectivity, which deals with this. But in this video, I'm going to go through a few of these drugs that can be useful in therapy. I'm going to give you my take on them, why they are useful, and ultimately what this means about our psychology. The first drug is ketamine, which is an analgesic. It's a pain reliever, and it has been shown for short-term benefits, specifically with serious or more serious psychological issues like trauma, PTSD. But yeah, it's a pain reliever, so it takes a lot of the pain around a trauma away, which allows for what? A more facilitated connection with other people. That's how ketamine can be effective, is if you use it as a temporary pain reliever to connect with other people, which is the ultimate therapy. This is very similar to how SSRIs are used, well, at least ideally, is we take the SSRI to help us get unstuck. Ketamine is a very powerful way to be unstuck, but a lot of the literature out there just shows that ketamine is only useful in the short term, which indicates that while it can be useful, it's just a crutch. It's just a gateway, not a gateway drug, but a gateway into a different level of experience, particularly a connection with somebody else, which will again facilitate the therapeutic process, which is becoming aware of our unconscious and integrating it into our psyche, integrating it into our conscious awareness. Another kind of drug similar to ketamine, well, not similar kind of drug, but similar in its use, is MDMA or ecstasy. This is probably less effective than ketamine. I mean, it's an amphetamine. So it raises your dopamine, raises your serotonin, or decreases reuptake of those two. So you feel really good, and when you're feeling really good, you're more likely to connect with other people. There's a lot of talk about how MDMA, quote, rewires your brain. That's just a way of saying that blood flows to different parts of your brain than it wasn't before taking MDMA. But you know what else rewires your brain, quote unquote, or you know what else increases blood flow to different parts of your brain, is making friends, developing connections with other people. So to the extent that MDMA can be used for that, I guess it can be effective. But again, if you're just using the drug for some therapeutic benefit in and of itself, it's probably not going to work out for you so well. Another drug, which is probably the least effective or the least therapeutic drug on this list, is marijuana, which is good for analysis, but not self-analysis. Really, I mean, this is why it's fun to use marijuana and then watch a movie. It's preferably a movie you've seen a lot of times before, but if you're watching it while you're high, you're just going to tune in different aspects of the movie, and this is what marijuana does, is it makes us more aware, but again, not of ourselves, which is ultimately what's going to be therapeutic. It makes us more aware of really sensory experiences, not even an emotional experience, just the concrete empirical sensation. That's what marijuana helps with. So not really helpful therapeutically, and there's no evidence that shows that it is. Drum circle, it's not a drug, but it's an altered state of consciousness, which has been shown to be helpful in the same way that acupuncture is helpful. If you think that acupuncture is going to relieve pain, then it tends to relieve pain more than if you go in with a skeptical eye. And that's how drum circles can be helpful. Like Native American, 3 hours long. It's initiation rite for not only Native Americans, but also Jungians. You're not really a full-fledged Jungian until you've attended a Native American drum circle. I have not, but I'm sure I will at some point, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. But again, it may be helpful for some sort of group cohesion, but as far as therapeutic benefit from it, beyond that, there really hasn't shown to be any. But hey, it's better than doing what most of us do, which is sitting in our room alone on Twitter, internet porn. So it's way more beneficial than that. Another altered state of consciousness is fasting, long-term fasting, 3, 4, 5 days. This is something that I have tried recently, and just from an introspective perspective, from my own experience with this, I can say that this probably is helpful. It isn't therapeutic so much, but what it does is it removes an extra layer of distraction from our lives. That distraction being food. I think a lot of us, I know I've done this, a lot of us use food to soothe out, to round off the rough edges of our emotional experiences. A little bit of anxiety, a little bit of pain, maybe guilt, regret you don't want to deal with. Just have a couple of Oreos, makes that whole process a lot smoother. So if you go 3, 4, 5 days without eating any food, well, it's one less distraction. So now you're much more likely to manage the issue on your own by thinking about it a different way, talking about it, journaling about it, other issues that maybe you've been repressing for a while. They may come to the surface, and you're forced to deal with them. And there's no Oreo escape hatch, right? You're just you and your issue there. Now, I think there is an extra benefit to long-term fasting when you get into even longer-term fasting, like 7, 8, 9 days. I've read, people talking about you get a altered state of consciousness. 3, 4, 5 days, you're not going to get an altered state of consciousness. It's just a removal of the distraction. But I've heard if you go even longer, you get maybe a little bit of not a hallucinogenic. I don't know. I haven't done it, but people online say that it can be really beneficial and therapeutic. I don't know. You go 8 days without food. Let me know how it goes. And finally, the most beneficial drug on this list in terms of therapy is psilocybin, or mushrooms, magic mushrooms. I think this can be really helpful because it takes the awareness of marijuana, but it kind of turns you in on yourself to make you more aware of what's going on. I mean, the way I describe it, I've used it a few times, and you just become aware of different levels of your unconscious all at the same time. Typically with introspection, or if you're journaling, you can only be aware of one issue or maybe 2 issues. But with psilocybin, I find that you become aware of multiple issues, and you can see how they can connect, and that informs how you live. So what psilocybin has been really useful for is addiction treatment, overcoming things like alcoholism or smoking. And that makes sense. Not that I've ever had a problem with either of those two, but I could see how you could take psilocybin and you would go, wow, you can become more aware on a different level to the extent that the alcohol or the tobacco is affecting you. So yeah, it's good for a depth of awareness, and the studies have shown that the long-term benefits of psilocybin are there, as opposed to all the other drugs like ketamine and MDMA. It's just short-term, doesn't really help in the long term unless it's combined with another kind of therapy. And that's really the big picture here. This isn't about being pro-drug or anti-drug. It's about understanding the context in which drugs may be helpful in therapy, and what this means about our psychology and how drugs can be helpful. With ketamine and MDMA, they facilitate connections between 2 people, and that connection between you and somebody else brings you to a deeper level of awareness about yourself, about your own issues, and that's the therapy. Or with psilocybin, it connects you to deeper parts of yourself. It makes you more aware of different parts of yourself, and that connection with yourself leads to a possible therapeutic experience. But it isn't the drug itself. The drug is just a tool, which is great, but it can only be used in the context of a proper therapeutic process. That's the idea here. And I guess in a great study, that's where I was going with this. And a great study that I think really shows this is a study that I cited in that article that's in the description. But I think it was about MDMA and PTSD group therapy. And it showed that MDMA made the group therapy twice as effective. So it was about 30% effective without MDMA, 70% effective with MDMA, but what was 96 or 97% effective is just going to the group therapy and then staying in touch with the people in the group after the group is over, also known as having friends. And this is really the therapeutic benefit of drugs, is the extent that can facilitate that experience. So drugs, they may be helpful, but only in context, and they definitely are not a replacement at all for a real therapeutic experience, which is managing our anxiety, managing unconscious anxiety, figuring out what we're avoiding, managing unconscious anger, figuring out what we need, and how to integrate those two aspects of ourselves into our psyche. And here at Animus Empire, we go into specifically how to do that. There is a specific methodology for doing exactly that. And that's what we deal with here. Thank you guys for joining me this week. Please like and subscribe. And always remember that the real altered state of consciousness is connecting with other people.